Good evening, everybody. My name is Eugene Peterson. I'm the interim chair of the Anne Arundel County Human Relations Commission. Uh, for background purposes, the Anne Arundel County Human Relations Commission was formally placed in the Anne Arundel County Charter in the last election, 2020. Previously to that, we were commissioned by executive order. And in the establishment of the commission, we have been given specific regulatory responsibility for addressing housing discrimination in the county with enforcement powers and an ability to resolve disputes and claims. Anybody who feels they're guilty of housing discrimination can go to the Anne Arundel County website and can fill out a form that we have there that will allow you to place a complaint. We also have general responsibility for addressing discrimination in the county and making Anne Arundel County the best place for all. I'd like to begin our commission meeting at 6:01 p.m., April 15th. And I'd like to call the commission to order and ask our secretary, Ms. Mary Daydoni, Commissioner Daydoni, to initiate the roll call of commissioners.
Thank you very much, Chairman Peterson. So I'll call your name first. And please respond verbally because we have both the audio record and the video record. If your case, especially if you're calling in by phone, we need to hear you. So Commissioner Peterson.
Present.
Thank you. Commissioner Daydoni is present. Commissioner Apter, are you with us yet? Not yet. Commissioner Gaskin.
Present.
Thank you. Commissioner Clapsaddle.
Present.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Hatcher. Thank you very much. Commissioner, and for brevity, Tosin, are you with us yet?
Present.
Thank you very much. Is Commissioner Said with us? Not yet. And we have an excused absence for our student member, Ms. Camille Carter. Is that correct, Chairman Peterson?
Yes, Ms. Carter is experiencing senior day, and it's her last volleyball game, and her parents mandated that she be at senior day, which I think is a good thing, and so she is excused.
I have attempted to be thorough. Have I overlooked anyone? Thank you.
Commissioner Daydoni, do we have a quorum?
Oh, yes, we do have a quorum. With the current membership, our quorum would stand at 5 individuals, and we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of us here.
Great. Let me move on now and explain. There were some minutes that were sent out, and I'd like to move to approval of the minutes. I believe at the last meeting, Commissioner Daydoni, and correct me if I'm wrong, we accepted the minutes from our February 11th special meeting, so they can be posted. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And all of you should have received in the last couple of days the March 18th meeting minutes, our formal meeting on March 18th. At this time, I'd ask if there are any corrections, deletions to those minutes. Hearing none, I entertain a motion to accept the minutes of March 18th.
So moved.
Thank you, Commissioner Clapsaddle. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Olatuso. So we've accepted the March 18th minutes. We are still working on the March 22nd minutes. So we do not have them for review.
February 22nd.
Pardon?
February 22nd.
No, thank you, February 22nd. Whoops, February 22nd. And I think that takes care of our minutes. Thank you all for bearing with me through this. We were asked, which moves us to our next item on the agenda, we were asked by the, I hope I got this right, the WISE LGBTQ Anne Arundel County Coalition to endorse their positions that they have suggested to the Anne Arundel County Board of Education to change, modify, improve their practices and policies as they relate to the LGBTQ community. And I believe it's both students and faculty and others in the county school system. So we have organized a presentation. I would like to, at this point in time, say that it was not an omission that we do not have a representative listed from the Anne Arundel County Public Schools, although I believe board member Dr. Joanna Tobin is listening in or is on the call. Having been a school board member for 10 years, the reason that the school board would not make a presentation at this time is they haven't taken any action. And no one board member can speak for the board prior to them taking action. And even after they take action, statements are usually made by either the president or the vice president of the board, which probably is the way that most boards and commissions work. So we'll have the presentation, and then I will ask Dr. Tobin if there's any clarification, not of the presentation, but any additional things she'd like to say to us, like, for instance, whether or not the board policy commission meetings are open, which I believe they are, whether citizens can attend, which I believe they can. And while they cannot participate in the discussion that's going on with the policy committee members and the presentations that are made, they can listen in. So having said that, I want to further explain how the presentation will develop. We'll begin with the representatives that the coalition, the WISE LGBTQ Anne Arundel County Coalition, has identified to talk with us and explain their concerns and why they want us to endorse their approach to, again, offering changes to the policies and practices in the Anne Arundel County public school system. They'll be followed, even though they have one student that they've identified to speak, by two other students who I asked our student commissioner, Camille Carter, to identify some students, and she did, that also would like to address us, hoping that even though she's a non-voting member, that gives students some feel that they're a formal part of our commission. After that, if there are any questions that commissioners might have of any of the presenters, we'd have a brief discussion answer period, and then we'd move to what I believe is what we've been asked if we would do, which is to see if there is a motion to move forward with communication with the Anne Arundel County Public Schools that we're in full support of the positions and concerns of the WISE LGBTQ group. That's long-winded. Does anybody have any questions now as to how we will proceed? Okay. Hearing none, I'd like to proceed as following. I'd like to ask Mr. Mark D'Angelo to begin, followed by Katie Russell, Catherine Moore, and Jaden Ferris, who then will be followed by two AACPS students, Cameron Mitchell Langley and Bumini Omasar. I hope I've not butchered that name, but if there's a correction to how I've identified you, please make that correction and briefly state who you are and why you're making this presentation on behalf of WISE, LGBTQ Anne Arundel County Coalition. Okay, Mr. D'Angelo.
Wonderful. Good evening, commissioners, and thank you so much for the opportunity to speak with you all on behalf of the LGBTQ+ Coalition for Safe Schools. My name is Mark D'Angelo. My pronouns are he, him, and I wanted to open our time together by sharing some context for our discussion. So a tweet went viral last year that said, LGBTQ+ people don't grow up as ourselves. We grow up playing a version of ourselves that sacrifices authenticity to minimize humiliation and prejudice. The massive task of our adult lives is to unpick which parts of ourselves are truly us and which parts we've created to protect us. This hit home for every single LGBTQ+ person I know, myself included. We spend so many of our most important formative years just doing what we can to survive and learning how to protect ourselves at any cost. Too often we face erasure, dehumanization, discrimination from people, systems, and institutions. And sadly, educational systems have borne a significant amount of responsibility reproducing this harm and these inequitable outcomes. The majority of our young people spend most of their waking hours at school. Our schools are supposed to be the place where every single student is supported without question, where they can thrive as their most authentic selves without fear of persecution, and where educators do everything in their power to set each student up for success. And that's not only best practice, it's Maryland law. Research from GLSEN, the Gay Lesbian Street Education Network, and our own Maryland Youth Behavior Studies have told us that LGBTQ+ students across the state and county face ongoing inequities, discrimination, a significant lack of resources, which communicates explicitly or implicitly from staff, students, or curricula that they are less than, deviant, invisible, or unworthy of recognition and support. This has resulted in higher levels of depression, absenteeism, self-harm, assault, poor academic achievement, suicidality, and suicide, unfortunately. ACCPS students have indeed told us about uneven, limited, or non-existent resources in their schools, or incidents of harassment and discrimination, and even inaction in the face of bullying or discrimination. And worse yet, discrimination at the hands of our own educators. Without comprehensive and enforceable policies around these issues, our students and families are suffering, and we're hoping we can count on your support to help us change that. AACPS has a history of leading on these issues. In 2015 and 2019, the Department of Student Services adopted groundbreaking guidance, and I quote, on the rights, responsibilities, and best educational practices with regard to gender identity and student support. And currently, AACPS has yet to extend these same or similar guidelines to the remaining identities within and across the LGBTQ+ spectrum. And because the Maryland State Department of Ed has not released an enforceable policy that addresses the needs of LGBTQ+ youth, each individual district is left to develop their own. With our proposed policy recommendations, for which we are seeking your endorsement, we are calling upon the school board to, 1, extend new and existing LGBTQ+ policy to cover all school-related activities and personnel. 2, respect the dignity and personhood of all LGBTQ+ students by using their correct pronouns and chosen names if disclosed without discrimination. 3, provide sufficient LGBTQ+ student resources through proper funding and staffing of inclusive student orgs and supports in grades 6 to 12. 4, implementing staff protocols around LGBTQ+ student experiences so that there are clearly delineated procedures for appropriately addressing issues that may arise. 5, meaningful LGBTQ+ training and professional development so that all school staff receive ongoing cultural competency building to best prepare them to support our students. 6, implement specific guidelines regarding gendered activities or facilities use, which is already a national best educational practice backed by research and data across all fields of scholarship. And 7, the right to privacy in student records, because students have a right to keep information about their sexuality or gender identity private at school, and staff shall not disclose this information without their express consent. These foundational policies would address historically significant and pervasive negative LGBTQ+ student experiences, outcomes, and opportunity gaps, which have long necessitated action by school leaders, policymakers, and community stakeholders such as yourselves. Before I turn it over to our remaining speakers, a teacher, parent, and student ally, all within AACPS, I wanted to leave you with this thought. We spend roughly 19,000 hours spanning our most impressionable formative years in our K-12 schools. 19,000 hours. We have a legal, democratic, and moral obligation to make sure those 19,000 hours that we provide for our students enhances, affirms, and cultivates their identities. That 19,000 hours are spent helping each of our students be the most successful and authentic versions of themselves. It is unacceptable if we allow just one of those hours to erode or degrade their identities. Our kids shouldn't spend a single hour in our schools learning to deny and reject their most authentic selves. Perhaps with these policies, LGBTQ+ youth in Anne Arundel County will be free to spend those 19,000 hours growing up as their true selves, instead of a version of themselves that sacrifices authenticity to minimize humiliation and prejudice. We can render the massive task of their adult lives unpicking which parts of themselves are truly them and which parts were created to protect them entirely unnecessary, so that their adult lives can instead be spent embracing joy, hope, success, authenticity, freedom, and most importantly, themselves. So I thank you for your time. I turn it over to Katie.
Well, Mark, that was I just felt everything that you said. I have to say that I know that's a little topic, but thank you everyone for having me today. My name is Katie Russo. I am a art teacher at a high school in Anne Arundel County, but I'm also a GSA sponsor. We go by LGBT Plus Club. And I have been the sponsor of that club for about 6 years now in the county. I distinctly remember when the transgender guidelines, as they used to be called, were first introduced, and how exciting it was to share that with my club and say, hey, look, AACPS sees you. And then seeing a look of sadness in their faces when they learn the difference between guidelines and policy. And so while the document says very powerful things, for example, teachers shouldn't out a student to their parents. It's still, if a student says, well, what happens if if that happens, then it's like, oh, well, I guess I will go talk to someone. And that's kind of been, for schools that do have a GSA, their GSA sponsor is their lookout. That is their advocate. That's their point person in the building to help support those relationships with their teachers. And I'm happy to do that. But a lot of schools in our county don't have a GSA, specifically at the middle school level, where I think there's a significant need to have a GSA in place, which is part of what the policy is recommending. But not just knowing one ally, but we have students at my school that do not access the LGBT plus club. We have plenty of students who are in the community, but don't feel comfortable being in the club or organization. And some of it is a fear of being outed, and some of it is because they know their parents would not want them to be there. So there's a fear there. There's also students who just feel like it's just not for them. They don't need to be in a room with a bunch of people talking about things related to their identity. So there's students in the school that know their support system, and there's students who may or may not be aware of or access them. But we need our students to know that everybody in the building is their ally. We need students to know that, hey, every teacher is fully equipped to chat with you about ideas of identity, figuring yourself out without any kind of restraint, being scared, having any fears. I mean, safety is our number one priority as educators, and currently our LGBT students just do not feel that safe. And even in a school that has worked really hard to try to foster that safe and supportive environment, without policy, it's really difficult to do that. I remember maybe once or twice I saw the guidelines change to have a little bit more firmer language, but there's still a lot of question marks, even for staff that goes through training looking at the document. And so I think that the best way for me to describe what we currently have in place in Anne Arundel County Public Schools is that we have bones. And now we need to really put the meat on those bones, because right now we have the very bare minimum. It's not comprehensive at all. And because of that, it's difficult for teachers, support staff, students. It's difficult for everybody to navigate and understand how we can best serve our students and how students can feel best supported. And so I think that it's really important to acknowledge that there's not a week that goes by in my GSA where a student isn't sharing something sad about family relationships, about teachers outing them, about peers bullying them. And this is the most tragic thing you can do, is sit in a meeting with a student and not be able to help support them in the way that you would like to, because things like this policy isn't in place. So that's my piece I want to share with you all, is that, you know, our students really need us on this. It's not just something that, you know, we need to take this seriously, and we need to be brave and make it happen for our students. I'm going to send it over to Jaden.
The order was Mark, Katie, Kat, me. Where I can go, it doesn't matter.
It's fine.
Okay, I guess I'm going. Good evening. My name is Jaden Ferris. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm a sophomore at South River High School. First, I'd like to thank the Anne Arundel County Human Relations Commission for inviting us to present our policy proposals. Although I am not a member of the LGBTQ plus community and am an ally, I spent a great deal of my time advocating for very close peers who are, and others whose voices are often silenced, and to those who are afraid to speak up. This policy is essentially a life or death situation. Schools should be a safe place for everyone, not just for some. People continuously preach safety in schools and act like it. Our schools should be safe, and this policy will ensure that. For instance, part of our policy is student organizations like GSAs, which I am actually this coming school year will actually become a reality with a countywide GSA. Though there are clubs, we need resources. This policy allows for those clubs to keep running and making sure for those who facilitate clubs like GSAs have the proper training and knowledge. GSAs allow for students to build community, feel safe and accepted, and so much more. Having clubs and organizations and resources will mean a great deal to those who often have no one out to reach out to. These clubs have been shown to drastically decrease the amount of anti-LGBTQ plus rhetoric in schools. This policy also allows my peers to feel that they belong and feel safe inside the schools. It protects students from detrimental experiences such as dead naming. For those who may not know what that means, it's use of the birth or other form or name of a transgender or non-binary person without their consent. This policy also allows for students to know that they are safe being outed purposely or accidentally by school staff, which happens way too much than it should. Outing students leads them to be potentially subjecting them to bullying, harassment, and family rejection. Kids need you. Thank you for having us, and now I'm going to pass it off to Boomy.
Thank you.
We,
Oh, wait, I thought it was supposed to go to, yeah.
Yep.
That's okay.
Or Boomy can go, whichever. My apologies.
It's okay, Jason.
It's okay.
My name is Catherine Moore, and I'm here to speak to you as a parent. I have a middle schooler who is an LGBTQ student in the county. I'm gonna try to get through this. My son has been a student in AACPS since third grade when we PCS'd and we're also military family. He came out as LGBTQ in fourth grade. Make no mistake though, he's been LGBTQ his whole life. But it was fourth grade when he learned the vocabulary to express his true self. And he learned the vocabulary because kids at school were calling him gay. And you're so gay, you're so gay. And he came home and he's like, Mom, what does that mean? And we had a conversation about words and the power of words and how a word can be a positive word and that very same word can be a nasty word. And throughout we kept talking about what different words mean, and finally he went, oh, I get it. And he went, I'm bisexual. And I was like, cool, bro. Awesome. And that was his coming out. It was no big deal in our household because he knew In our family, people are people, love is love, and that's all that matters, right? But unfortunately, not all children are brought up in the same environment. There's a lot of hatred in the world. But in our school system, that shouldn't be the case. And he learned that the hard way. In 5th grade, he wasn't ready to be out right at school. He was still keeping it to himself. Until another boy in his class was being bullied for being gay. And he pulled that friend aside and told him his secret, because to him it was still a secret, because he had seen other kids being bullied and mistreated for being Black, for being gay, for being Asian, for being immigrant. And he wasn't ready to take that on himself. But he pulled his friend aside and he said, "Hey buddy, me too, you're not alone, you know?" And he came home from school that day and he told me, and I told him how proud I was of him for his big empathetic heart. And then I cried myself to sleep that night because I was so worried about what was in store for him now that he was starting to come out. I was so proud of him, but I was also terrified as a mom, because what was this going to mean for not just my son, but all the LGBTQ youth in our county as they're learning to live in the light and embrace who they are. Were our schools, our teachers and administrators, are they properly equipped to take care of our children, our most precious resources? Are they properly equipped? As my son entered middle school, I learned that they were not. Now, make no mistake, I am not saying anything negative about our teachers. My son has received an incredible education. He has loving, devoted teachers that he adores, he sends emails with. You know, they have made such a significant impact on him that he's going to remember them forever. But from the moment he set foot in middle school, he decided that he was going to live in the light and be his authentic self. He and his fellow LGBTQ youth has faced immense bullying, assault even. I'm not just talking verbal. It can get quite nasty for our children. And part of the problem, and what Ms. Russo was touching on, is our administrators and our staff don't always have the tools to address this bias-based bullying, right? And so what this policy does is it gives them the tools, the training to handle it. I think in a lot of cases, a lot of us, and I include myself in this too, because I'm still learning. A lot of us have hidden biases. You know, we're not always aware of the biases that we have. And I know, you know, the county has been quite public about the training they've given teachers in their equity development on the Unity Days, so they can learn their biases to do a better job of educating our children of color, because studies have shown that children of color were discriminated against. They were disciplined more harshly. And so they've gone through a lot of training so that they can do better, right? Because when we know better, we do better. So we're asking for the county to do the same thing when it comes to our LGBTQ children. Sorry, I'm very nervous. LGBTQ children cross all demographics, right? All races, all religions, all nationalities, every demographic in our school system. When virtual learning was announced, my son was happy. He was ecstatic. And I couldn't believe it, because he actually, for the most part, enjoyed school. And I asked him why. And he said 2 words: no bullying. There's no bullying when you're on a computer with your classmates. He can mute his mic, he can turn off his camera. And that's a very sad reality that a lot of our children are facing, not just mine. So these policies implementing the staff protocols, the specific guidelines regarding gendered activities, providing sufficient student resources, respecting the dignity and personhood of all students. They protect my child. They protect all of our children. And it means, like all LGBTQ parents, we're not crying ourselves to sleep anymore, worrying about our children. It means when my son comes home and I ask him how his day was, I'm going to hear the good stories, and I'm not going to hear that so-and-so threw me into a locker again and called me. I will not repeat what he was called. I won't repeat the things that are said to him because it's not appropriate. It means those things won't be happening. So I ask you, I beg you, to please be brave. Be brave like my son was in 5th grade and stand up for our children. Thank you.
Now we're going to hear from a couple of more students. First, we'll hear from Cameron Michael Langley. Hope he's on.
I don't think Cameron is on.
Okay. How about Boomy?
Boomy, yes. I just wanted to introduce myself really fast. My name is Boomy Masore. I'm a junior at Arundel. I'm a current SMOG candidate, but most importantly, I am an ally. And I think we've heard just a plethora of anecdotes, of evidence, of proposals, of just experience in the human condition when it comes to our LGBTQ students. But I think one thing we need to recognize when it comes to this policy is that this is not the end goal. This is barely meeting the center of the circle. This is taking a bite. A couple of weeks ago, I held an ELC Equity Leadership Council meeting centered around trans rights. And I handed the mic over to the trans students at Arundel High School. And as an ally, I realized more than ever before my privilege in being cisgendered. Now, I know especially Ms. Russo might recognize this, that in the virtual setting, our GSA attendance, which before was it was average, it was a typical club at Arundel. I thought it was pretty successful. But now that you have students who are at home, where they are not out, where they are not themselves, that attendance has almost plummeted. Something that I didn't even recognize, I didn't even think of until I talked to my GSA advisor. Just small little anecdotes like that are things that we as cisgendered, as heteronormative people who are not part of that community don't even think of. And I think that this proposal, like I said, is taking a bite into what should have already been done years ago. When we look at this policy, although it addresses things like dead naming, it addresses things like pronouns, we need to recognize that this is only immersing us in the culture of being an ally, not only as something that is unique, that should be given a pat on the back, but as something that needs to be normalized. Remember, currently, we have no queer or gender or any study courses in ACPS. Remember, we have no incentives, and even in all my time in ACPS, I have never had a lesson on any gay history, on any trans history. I've had to seek that out myself. We have so many fundamental structural blocks in our school system that are still missing that type of alliance with our LGBTQ students. And so when we think about this policy, this isn't a stretch. This is not even a favor. This is warranted. This should have not even taken asking. This is the only option when it comes to beginning to show our LGBTQ students that we are not only with them, we are not only thinking of them, but we are taking initiative so that when we look at our elementary schoolers who don't have the language yet to distinguish their identity, They will come into secondary school, they will come into high school, middle school, already having the pillows, the back push that they need so that they know somebody has my back here. Even if it's only one teacher, which is more than a lot of students, not only in ACPS, not only in Maryland, but in the United States and around the world as a whole. This policy, while I'm in full support of it, is only it's not a recommendation. It's only just a hint of what I would like to see, not only before I graduate and before I leave ACPS, but before my nieces leave this school system, before my fellow peers like Jaden, who's a year younger than me, the people who I talked to earlier today, middle schoolers, some of whom may be part of this community, before they leave. This is an ongoing effort. When we say the word ally, some people think of it as a label, some people think of it as a fixed identity, but it is a conscious, continuing step. You're always trying to be an ally. You are always taking steps that fall into the category of being an ally. And so supporting this bill, pushing this through is one way to succeed in that goal, but it's not the end. It's not a period, it's a semicolon. You keep on going on, you keep on going on, you don't finish with the sentence, you keep on writing the paragraph. And that's what I think this should be. Not a conclusion, but a topic sentence. Remember, there are so many things that we as cisgendered, as heterosexual people don't even need to begin to think about. My friend Alex, who goes by they/them, is transgender. I had never even thought about the fact that our health teachers don't know about binders. They don't know about testosterone. They don't even think about teaching sex education from a non-heteronormative standpoint. Recognizing one, the concerns, the stories, and the experiences of our LGBTQ students in order to not only allow the students to teach their teachers, but the students teach their board members, the students teach their parents, the students to teach the adults in their life who have the power. Recognizing that is one of the first steps we can do when it comes to pushing this forward. And remember, keep on being an ally is what supporting this bill would mean. Recognize what you don't know, what you didn't know before, what you don't know now, and what you still have yet to learn through supporting this bill and continuing in actions like it that will help not only just say or change rhetoric, like when it comes to abuse, which is what I'm going to call it, harassment, which is what I'm going to call it, discrimination, not just bullying. This is not like a 1940s TV show where like the big bad bully steals your lunch money. This is heinous, almost near criminal abuse near our most vulnerable, most sensitive, marginalized groups in our county. Supporting this bill and actively seeking to excel in all of its contents is, again, a bite, not the whole thing, but a step into what we're trying to do here as allies, which is making sure that those students and future adults, future functioning members of our society no longer have to be an adult struggling with their identity, juggling around their trauma before they can feel like themselves, something that you should be able to find in your adolescence and in school, and not when you're outside of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Very moving and powerful statement. Before we go further, I will start it this way. I would like to ask if there's anything additional that Dr. Tobin, if you are on the call, that you would like to say about your process and how the process works in terms of the school board and the policy committee. Is there anything?
Absolutely, Mr. Peterson. Thank you for the opportunity, and thank you so much for the invitation to attend this evening. I'm very, very grateful to have been here, to have heard these presentations. I am Joanna Bache Tobin. I am a member of the Board of Education representing District 6, which is the Annapolis area and surrounds. And I'm also chair of the policy committee. And so I thank also Mr. Peterson for his comments. I know it can seem odd that we have a structure whereby we no one of us as board members can make a statement for the entire board, nor can we make a statement till we've taken an action. So I was very grateful to him for explaining that and for allowing me to listen. So the process is, and some of you may already have done so, when our committees meet, we have a budget committee, we have a policy committee, we have an equity committee. When our committees meet, in the virtual setting, what that means is the public can listen by telephone, which I appreciate can be frustrating because you can't see what we're talking about. You can only kind of hear what's going on, but that's simply, if we were not virtual, we'd be in a conference room and members of the public could sort of sit around the edges and listen. But until our documents are public, they're not public, so to speak. We have obviously gotten a lot of input from WISE, GLSEN, and other advocacy groups and individuals, all of which we've taken into account. This policy, when I was sworn into the board on December 7th, it was already clearly a high priority for the board. We had 2 meetings on this policy, and at the last meeting, we voted the policy out unanimously to now be presented to the board at large for a vote. So I'm very encouraged by the unanimous vote. The structure is then when the board votes on it, assuming they vote positively to put it up for public comment, the policy will then be public for comment. Now, it will, when the board materials, our next board meeting is next Wednesday, the 21st. Usually the agenda, a draft agenda, it's not final, but a draft agenda and most of the accompanying materials go up on the ACPS website, usually on Fridays, so probably tomorrow. So those of you who are interested can view what's there. There are opportunities for public comment, obviously, at our meeting on Wednesday, as well as you can always send written comment, and I assure you we read all of them. We don't have aides the way legislators do, so often board members can't respond to all the emails they get, but I assure you, I certainly read every email I get. We all read them. And so it will go up for a first read, assuming we voted out. There's a 30-day, well then a second read after a review by the board, et cetera. All of that time, there is opportunity for public comment. So there is always opportunity to come in and add any comment you wish. I will now say, speaking personally, I am an ally. My 87-year-old mother who lives with us still mourns her first cousin who died a far too young death because she was a lesbian in a time and a place where she could not be who she was, and literally engaged in self-destructive behaviors that I think too many people in our world have done to themselves because of what the world has done to them. And I miss her, and my mother misses her every day. And I lost my own first cousin, who was very dear to me at the age of 32 in the first wave of gay men who were killed by the AIDS epidemic. And I saw what he suffered growing up, and I worked in the professional theater and had numerous friends who still suffer simply for being who they are. And I am determined that not happen. I am encouraged, as I said, we voted this out unanimously. The policy will be coming up. I can assure all of you, we hear and understand what you're saying and feel it is critical that there be enforceable, consistent policy protecting every single child in our system, every single person in our system. And so, as I said, that's a personal, thank you for the time, but those are just some personal thoughts I wanted to add. So thank you all. And I look forward to hearing and seeing any more input that you have. And thank you, Mr. Peterson. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. At this point in time, I'd like to talk about where we are in terms of what we've been asked to do. All commissioners received the policy recommendations that the WISE LGBTQ plus Anne Arundel County Coalition sent to us for review and for endorsement. So if we were to take any action today as a body, we would act upon those policy recommendations, which all of you have received and hopefully have at least given cursory, if not a very fine review. So that is our position at this point in time. If we were to take an action, what I envision it being would be that we would draft a letter that would go to the school board, and we would also then attach the policy recommendations that we received, and we would say that we're in full support of these changes to the policies, the guidelines and practices in the Anne Arundel County public school system. Okay, having said that, I guess the first order of business would be to ask if commissioners have any questions of any of the very fine presenters that we had today. Commissioner Clapsaddle? Are you muted, Commissioner Clapsaddle?
I think I'm all right now.
Yeah, you're not.
First of all, I wanted to thank all of you very much for your commentary. You're looking at a man who has scars, because I was brought up in the 40s. I had no one to talk to. So it's all very emotional for me. And forgive me for my weepiness. It's certainly not out of courage, lack of courage. So I feel privileged to be a part of this group, and I support this coalition wholeheartedly and without question. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Haven't heard any other comments from commissioners. Oh, sorry, Commissioner Dedoni.
Thank you. Yes, I can imagine you looking at my face, those of you who don't know me, and wondering where I stand, because I realize I look stern today. I stand compassionately and fully with you. Absolutely. If I have the privilege of doing so, I would like to introduce later in our discussion at the appropriate time the resolution to endorse this recommendation.
Sure.
To choose to send a member to the Board of Education to speak at any of the 3 opportunities. I volunteer to be a person who does that. I do have a question. It relates to other work I've done with the Board of Education around the policies on bias language and behavior, the policy and the regulation around that. I'm switching to my copy of that. I know that gender identity bias is listed as covered by this, sexual orientation bias is listed as covered by this. Help me find the right language. Is that language sufficiently broad? And how do we keep the fact that that's already in policy and regulation? Policy R's J0, I think it is, regulation J0, from becoming a way of sinking your efforts? And how do we address the fact that even though that is in policy and in regulation, young students are still being shoved in closets, into lockers, and everyone can go around with the same hateful language and it's not being reported, which I believe is a violation of policy in that regulation, as I understand it. So as you can see, I have a little bit of history related to at least what's intended to be anti-bias, anti-bullying policies and regulations, and apparently they're not working. Please inform me. And when is the first opportunity to testify? Will it be at the introduction on 421? Thank you for that clarity on that.
So yes, there's opportunity to speak on the 21st. I didn't mention, but I think those of you who are listening in on the committee meeting, the policy as it was voted out is fully covers the full LGBTQ plus community. So that was, because initially it was gender identity. So that has been changed. What you're talking about, I believe, Ms. Dodoni, is now the enforcement of what we have, right? It is my hope that the way the policy has been constructed, which includes things, I think all of which was laid out early on, but all the PD, all the other pieces of the puzzle, that is part of it. And that's why now we have a specific policy around this, because I think it was clear that the anti-bullying, anti-bias was not doing what we needed it to do. It had to be stated for all the reasons that Ms. Russo and others, I think, illuminated. We needed something very clearly stating why this had to be put together the way it was put together. But again, you can look at, you should be able to see in the meeting materials with the agenda when they go up on the public website, what is available. And we are including, I believe the regulations or the guidelines will be included with the policy when it's put up, because we also want people to understand, for those who may not be as supportive of this, that this is a continuity of what we're doing. This isn't a change in the sense that ACPS is going in a different direction, certainly than was the intent of the guidelines. And so we will be putting both of those things up. The other thing I will say, obviously, I think Ms. Dodoni, you're very familiar with this, but not everyone is. Policy and regulations are two different things, right? Policy is what the board does, which determines what AACPS will do. The regulations, the last line of any policy is something like, and the board directs the superintendent to create regulations, et cetera, et cetera. The regulations are how it's going to be done. They are largely in the purview of the superintendent. That does not mean that the board does not have the power to look at the regulations and say that's not doing what we intended the policy to do. I mean, there's certainly always that ability, but they are slightly different things. So regulations will kind of get into the weeds, so to speak, on implementation, where policy is really meant to direct what the goals, what the process is that we want a CPS to pursue. So that's just another sidebar for those who, you know, don't spend their time looking at board policies and regulations on a regular basis. So Ms. Dodoni, I don't know, did that help to answer your question at all?
Yeah, yes, it does. The first place to engage. Let me feedback what I'm understanding and thinking and ask for feedback from anyone. The first time to engage is actually be Sunday afternoon in order to be able to testify on Wednesday. The policy and regulation that the board voted on both of those in late 2019, late 2019, does apply, but it's not being applied, which means that it's standing unused, insufficiently used, which is in itself a huge concern for anyone concerned about human rights and civil rights. I know you worked on the equity policy as well, and that hasn't yet been turned into anything with teeth, has it?
So I will say this is a case where my relative newness on the board, I am on the equity committee. We are working on, we're actually literally, we had our first real official equity meeting a couple of days ago for the committee. So we will be meeting again May 12th. We're coming up with our mission statement for the equity committee because it's a newly formed committee. And we're going to be proceeding from there. So there's a lot of work that's going to come from that. But that's as far as I've gotten into the specific work on equity on the board thus far, except for tangential conversations during board meetings on particular issues.
Thank you for the clarification.
Any other board members with specific questions of any of the panelists? Okay, I have one question of clarification for Dr. Tobin. Dr. Tobin, you warm my heart because you're an ally, and when I was on the board, I was an ally with, as I like to say, people who didn't have a voice and many times didn't have a vote. So my question is, as an ally, I guess, were we to take any action, we would, I guess, see you as someone who would be going through the regulations with a fine-tooth comb. Is that correct?
Oh, yes. We look very closely at the regulations. We receive them at our committee meetings along with the policy. So yes.
Thank you so much. Okay, at this point in time, I'd like to do two things. I'd like to ask Commissioner Dodoni if we take an action, could you, if we haven't prepared the letter by then, but when is the next board meeting?
Wednesday. Is that a morning or an afternoon meeting?
This is an evening meeting.
Okay, so it's Wednesday.
The 21st.
21st,
and
okay.
I'm sorry to step out of turn, but I think I saw a hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Is there a hand up?
Commissioner Hatcher has her hand up.
Oh, okay.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I first want to commend all the speakers and the allies that are present today. Thank you so much for showing your human side and your personal experiences, and as well as your compassion and passion to make changes. I think we are, in the culture that we live in, are in a time where change is bound to happen. And so I respect you all for being the pioneers or fourth runners for this change. As a mom myself to an elementary school age child, I do have a question. I see that in the policy, there's a section there about locker rooms and overnight trips and things of that nature. And, you know, I, for one, am teaching my child to not see the outer appearance or react to the outer appearance, but to kind of react to the character of that person. However, I do know that there's still change that needs to happen. So in regards to your policy, how does it speak to those that aren't necessarily comfortable if they have a school age child and the gender identity of another person proclaims to be she? But what does the policy say to that person that may not feel comfortable because they can still see the born identity of the other person? I think I read something here where they could ask to be in another changing room or use another facility. So would that be just kind of the ongoing?
Every child, for any reason, has the right to request what they need for their privacy, their comfort, whatever that may be. This codifies that that's the case for the LGBTQ plus community, but it is in fact true for anyone. So that remains the case. I have to say, I finally had the opportunity to tour some schools again and see kids in hybrid and sort of get a sense of how things are going. And, you know, one of the more sensible designs in some schools is that there is simply a bathroom in each classroom, right? It's not gendered, it's just a bathroom. And, you know, I would hope moving forward, for example, that will be what we do, because it frankly makes sense. And it alleviates for some of, I think, the kinds of things, Ms. Hatcher, is it Ms. Hatcher, that you're getting at. Overnight trips are another issue. And again, every single child has the right, every parent has the right on behalf of their children to ask, to say, this is not comfortable and we need an alternative changing space or an alternative, if it's an overnight sleeping space or whatever it is. So that is true for every single child. So I hope that's helpful.
Well, it is. I guess, so how does it make it so that someone doesn't feel ostracized because they are uncomfortable or they, you know, for religious reasons, they may not want to kind of, you know, conform to, like, in the policy, I see the line items, and I also see that there's still a lot of, you know, kind of gray areas that I guess would need to be further discussed so that on both sides, there's some form of agreement as how everyone could kind of just be in the same space and area and respect one another. I don't know. I'm still reading and like you said, this is new for a lot of us to change our ways and our, you know, and to identify our biases and face that head on. So I am willing. I am definitely willing. I just want to just truly understand how that policy will affect also those that, you know, are may have a little bit of a challenge there. That's all.
I think Ms. Omasori's comments alluded to ultimately one of the most critical things that has to happen, which is to truly normalize complexity and difference, to recognize that the sort of covering categories we tend to work with just don't really aren't necessary and don't apply in the way. I mean, this is my own view. But that is, I think, also when Ms. Omasari said, you know, this is a bite at where we're headed. I think you, Ms. Hatcher, have illuminated something that is going to be a matter of ongoing education, of ongoing culture, the culture of our schools, the culture of our, of our broader culture. And each piece of this, you know, education is the most human of institutions. Humans are highly complex, and this is highly individualized in many, many ways. And I think just as we are aiming at not having any child thrown in the locker or worse for being gay or for being perceived as being a lesbian or trans or whatever, we don't want anything to happen to any child for their feelings, right? That those feelings have to be explored and examined, and hopefully the community grows in the process. But I don't think there's a button we can push immediately. But my hope is all the pieces that have been were talked about earlier, that I hope you'll find are in our policy, will be the groundwork for developing that robust, diverse, truly diverse community.
Commissioner Clapsaddle. Did you have something to say, Commissioner Clapsaddle?
I do.
Okay.
I think the word is evolution. Back in the early 50s, when I think I was in the 8th grade, they said that 10% of our population identified as gay. I don't even know whether they used the word gay in those days. So we have seen progress. And so, Commissioner Hatcher, I was prejudiced as a kid. You know, I was prejudiced against myself, you know, and I think that's something that we are, I think this policy will enrich everyone within the Anne Arundel County Public School System. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Clapsaddle. Any further comments? Okay, hearing none. As I was saying earlier, Commissioner Day-Doney, I think we have enough time so that we can draft a letter if we decide to do so, and then have you, if you would be so gracious to go and testify before the or speak before the school board in favor of our position in support of the WISE LGBTQ Anne Arundel County Coalition recommendations for the policy changes in the Anne Arundel County Public School System as they relate to the LGBTQ plus community. So,
shall I record that, or shall that be recorded as a motion?
As chair of the commission, I would be more comfortable if someone else made the motion.
I therefore move that this commission take the action of drafting a testimony in support of the proposed LGBTQ plus policy recommendations, and that we send a representative from this commission to the board meeting to be held this coming Wednesday to present that testimony if we are selected for public testimony.
I second it.
It's been properly moved and seconded. All those in favor signify so we can do this by saying aye.
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 Okay. How many ayes is that? Let's count them out. Commissioner Clapsaddle, aye. Who else aye? You have to speak up.
Commissioner Bula, I believe, also verbalized an aye.
Yeah, I said aye.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay. And
Oh, and Commissioner Apter has his hand in the air.
all right, very good. Okay.
And you?
Yes.
Okay, you're an aye as well?
Yes. Okay. Are there any nays? Speak up now, if ever hold your peace. Raise your hand.
I believe that leaves us with either a mute or a abstention by Commissioner Syed.
Okay.
Commissioner Syed, could you unmute and tell us if you wish to abstain or vote? Hearing nothing, I will record it as a no vote.
Okay. Is everybody okay, what's the count? Did the motion pass?
Yes, I have recorded ayes from Didoni, Peterson, Gaskin, Hatcher, Clapsaddle, and Apter. Have I missed anyone?
Okay,
Tosin?
Yes, thank you, Tosin. I'm so sorry. And thank you.
Okay. So motion is passed, and we will, why don't we do this? I'll start drafting the statement. I'll work with you, Commissioner Didoni, if that's okay. I'll send you my draft, and I know you will improve it, and then we will go from there. And one of us, I guess, will decide who's going to sign. It'll either be me at this school board or Commissioner Didoni, because you regularly attend those meetings. But I'd be happy to do this because as chair of the commission, it probably carries greater weight. So
that would be great. And
great.
We're going to have plenty of opportunities.
Yes, we will. As I haven't been a school board member, as it rolls along before it's finally adopted. Are there any other comments that anybody has? Okay.
I do have a comment.
Oh, yes. Commissioner Hatcher.
I think the only comment I have is if we could continue to have these conversations, right? Because the evolution, as Joe has said, is happening, isn't going to just, transpire without some form of dialect and just continue to have these conversations. So I'm hoping that we can do so moving forward.
With that in mind, after the school board disposes with this policy discussion and then votes on a policy, or before that, maybe it would be good to have the WISE LGBTQ plus Anne Arundel County Coalition come back and talk about who they are, how they get founded, and what they see as what they're trying to do to improve human relations in Anne Arundel County. Okay. Gotcha.
Mr. Peterson, I'm going to have to jump off to another meeting. Our Excellence in Education Awards are tonight.
Oh,
so I need to get to that, but I just wanted to thank everyone again. I'm tremendously appreciative of your willingness to invite me, and it was a pleasure to be able to hear all the presentations. So thank you, and thank you very, very much for the work that you do on this commission. It's truly appreciated. Have a good night, everyone.
All right. Why don't we move on to item 5 on our agenda, which is commission updates and reports. And now we'll hear from our acting human relations officer, Ms. Ridgway. Joelle.
Good evening, everyone. I just want to echo what others said in terms of, I know many of them are jumping off, but I appreciate the time and the information that the people from the school district provided to us tonight. I thought it was very compelling. Things are moving along in the human relations office, one transition to another, right, Eugene? But one of the things, I'm not sure whether Eugene reached out to all of you or not, but we're hoping to present Roberto with an executive citation at next month's meeting. So we're going to have that mailed to him and see if he can attend next month's meeting, just as a thank you from the county executive, the administration, county council, et cetera, that for his service and work with this group. The interviews are scheduled for the director position. So myself and Kelly Lovett, who she's doing the employment side of the human relations office right now. She's in the Office of Personnel. And so her and I are contributing to being part of the panel for those interviews that are going to start in the next couple of weeks. So I'll keep you updated on how that's going. I did also share with Eugene, and I'd be happy to send it to all of you. The Maryland Commission on Civil Rights is doing a fair housing forum. April is Fair Housing Month. And they have put together quite an agenda to really look at and talk about and educate about fair housing in Maryland. So it's April 27th and 28th. It's virtual, and I'd be happy to send it to the group if people are interested in it. In terms of police reports, for the month of March, I received 7 reports. They consisted of topics related to police information, assault, theft, disorderly conduct, and destruction of property. 2 of those met the threshold to be reported to the state. I will say that, you know, I feel like so much of what I see is in these reports is really disheartening in a way that we, you know, that we call people names, and a lot of these reports are really verbal altercations where people are using racial and derogatory terms to address other people. So, and then in terms of the complaints that the Human Relations Office received, or inquiries, there were only 2 for the month of March, so it was a quiet month. There was 1 formal complaint, which I did share with Eugene, and I also closed that complaint out. Again, I mentioned it last month, but there was a somebody who is renting in a single family home, I think like a basement. She wanted an emotional support animal as a reasonable accommodation. There is a little bit of There's some vagueness, I think, in terms of how that applies with single family homes. She did, because it didn't fall under Anne Arundel County Fair Housing Act, there wasn't anything that I could do. But I did give her some resources to include Maryland Commission on Civil Rights, Housing and Urban Development, Disability Rights Maryland, and the Maryland Fair Housing Action Agency. And then the only other thing that I received this month was an inquiry for information. Somebody was having an issue, a landlord-tenant issue, and had a question about her lease and security deposit and when it could be returned. So the Fair Housing Action Agency has an advocacy portion where you can reach out to them and talk to them about those things. So I referred her there. Mary, you have a question or a comment?
It is a question, and thank you. At an NAACP meeting last night, I heard of a case, at least one case, there may be many more, in a rental facility, a larger rental complex, where many tenants have been granted leniency in rent payments because of COVID. And the case I heard was presented as a consequence, those who have been able to pay have had additional fees and fines levied, not fees and service charges levied, which appear to be aiming to offset the loss of income because of those who are not able to pay during COVID and not being evicted. Is this an issue that falls within our purview? In my consideration, this may have to do with source of income. And I just wanted to present that as a topic for perhaps some feedback offline.
Okay, I'd be happy to get a little bit more information from you about it, and compare it to what our fair housing law here in Anne Arundel County says. And I'm assuming this is in Anne Arundel County, and if at a minimum, there probably are some other resources if it doesn't fall under our purview.
Commissioner Clapsaddle?
Yes, Ms. Ridgway, I would like to attend this conference on the fair housing.
Okay, I'll send it to you.
Because I think that was the primary function of this commission when it was formed. And I feel that I need to be brought up to date so that I can make the appropriate contributions for which I've been appointed. So whatever needs to be done, I'm sure that Commissioner Peterson will advise me about that.
Okay, I'll forward that to you. They have a really, I don't know whether he's going to be doing the training, but his name's Keith Murky, and he does outreach and training for MCCR. He's one of the most dynamic speakers I've ever heard. So he's fantastic at educating people on fair housing and discrimination.
Thank you.
Sure.
Joelle?
Yes.
I too, but my question is for the 27th and the 28th, which is a Tuesday and Wednesday, is that an all day or is that an evening? Do you have the times?
Pull it up. Day one is from 10 to 1, which is a fair housing legal update. Actually, I was going to share my screen, but I don't know if it will mess up anything. But I will. We'll see. So here it is. And I can send this to the group. There's a fair housing legal update. There's an institutional anti-Blackness and housing discrimination. And then I think there's more detail in specifics about what these sessions are. But Maryland Fair Housing Roundtable, and then structural racism in housing, a closer look at Prince George's County. So I'd be happy to forward this to you.
There's a lot of other
information just about it in general. So I'm happy to send it to you guys.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Is there any other questions, comments, or anything else for me?
Hearing none, like to move on to the okay, here we are. Like to move on to
before we move on, could I
yes.
say?
Sure.
You know, in the last hour or so, there's been you know, fascinating presentations, and there's been a lot of acronyms used, many of which I don't know. I don't know what PD means. I don't know what CIS means. I don't know what MCCR means. And I'd appreciate it if we'd stop using acronyms internally. Can't, you know, demand that of other folks, and be clearer for our audience. I'm sure I'm not the only one that doesn't know what a lot of these acronyms represent.
We'll take it. We'll work on improving the presentations, and certainly in
so what does PD mean?
Professional development. That's for teachers and staff of AACPS. It was used. That's the context in which it was used. But
Okay.
Professional development.
What does CIS mean?
I think that's a way of identifying yourself in terms of your gender identity.
CIS means that you recognize that your identification is your birth gender identity.
Okay.
But I agree with you, Mark. I mean, I've been a gay man for 70 years and I still don't know what they all mean. So I think I would just reiterate the need for us to be clear.
Thank you.
And they actually gave definitions within a policy to kind of help express some of those terms so that we would know them.
Yeah, I thought that was the case. Thank you, Commissioner Hatch.
And Mark, I do apologize.
My husband always uses acronyms with me for his work, and I'm always like, I have no idea what you're talking about. I don't work in that same thing. But MCCR is Maryland Commission on Civil Rights. So I do apologize for that also.
Well, you don't need to apologize. I used to work for FEMA, which was acronym, and the senior person in the agency, the sub-agency I worked for, made a rule that anybody that used an acronym in a meeting would be fined $1, which would be put into a party fund.
I think that's a great policy. I might institute that at home.
Point well taken. I like that too. Now I'd like to move on to I sent everybody out the majors report on incidents during the month. I believe you got that. And also there has been no change in their investigation of the Brooklyn Park incident. That still don't have much to go on in terms of the graffiti, hate language that was used to deface property. County council updates. Are there any, Commissioner Daydoni?
Not at this time.
Thank you. Community outreach. I've been asked on April 29th to give a presentation before the Youth Advisory Council of Anne Arundel County and explain to them what the Human Relations Commission is, what we do, and how we transact our activities. On the suggestion of Ms. Brown, Megan Brown, we've also asked our non-voting student member, Ms. Carter, if she would also find a time to attend with me and join me in the presentation. So that is where we are in terms of community outreach. Any other reports on community outreach from any other commissioners, things you're doing? Meetings attended, etc. Okay. There is no old business. Now we have one item of new business, consideration of developing a Human Relations Commission statement regarding recent use of force incidents. That's not in Anne Arundel County. That's the ones that we've unfortunately witnessed nationally. Commissioner Daydoni asked me to put this on the agenda. Commissioner Daydoni, do you have anything that you'd like to say in terms of discussion on this item? Okay, I think she's away from the meeting. Let me say a couple of things briefly about how I see this request in new business. As you are aware, on our website, we have a statement that we developed and issued after the George Floyd murder. We had specific items that we cited, like endorsement of the 8 Can't Wait agenda, also calling for Citizens Review Board activity in Anne Arundel County. Also discussing other items that we felt in terms of transparency. Since then, I know that Chief Awood is working on some things that would increase transparency in the police department, I believe, in terms of the website and so in reporting of statistics, et cetera. And we also have had the repeal of the Law Enforcement Officers Bill of Rights in the state of Maryland. First, we were the first state to implement that legislation. Now we're the first state to eliminate that legislation. So I'd be looking for some discussion from other commissioners in terms of what you see as how we should proceed if we decide to proceed on anything. Should we reiterate our support of the items that we initially endorsed during the aftermath of George Floyd's murder? Should we, and I think we've also discussed and also had a communication with the chief in terms of some items that we saw that we might consider recommending as legislation that might be similar to the legislation that was passed in Baltimore County? Or are there other specific legislative items? For example, like a ban on chokeholds in our county that members of the commission think should be something we should find a way to present to the county executive, and then see if that can also be either introduced by the county executive as is legislation, or whether or not we have the ability to present that kind of recommendation of legislation to the county council ourselves, which again reinforces the idea that we probably should get Mr. Barron in to tell us again what's the rules of the road in terms of how we might either endorse, propose specific legislative items. Commissioner Dadoni, I was just going through a number of actions that we might take as a result of this new business item, ranging from re-endorsing the statement that we issued after the murder of George Floyd, to recommending up through the county executive the development of legislation similar to what has been passed in Baltimore County in terms of transparency and whatnot. Continuing dialogue with the chief of police, Chief Aboud, in terms of actions that the police department is already taking to increase transparency and other items that they're proposing to do. And also considering recommending to the executive, and hopefully then would go be recommended to the county council to enact specific legislation like a ban on chokeholds in the county, which a lot of residents, I think, given some things that have happened and that the whole discussion over the board, the review board on the incident that happened with the citizen and the Anne Arundel County deputy, and the use of force activity that was similar to what happened to Mr. Floyd. So that's what I laid out to the commission, and I was hoping that you could speak to why you think we should do something and what that something might be.
Yes, thank you. At the very least, I believe we need a public statement. This is no time for a board that is based in equity to be silent when our population is hurting so badly. Our silence is speaking for us. Therefore, we need a public statement, a press release at a minimum. Everything else you've recommended, I absolutely concur with. I have nothing to add to that. We do anticipate that the governor will be vetoing many of the policing bills that pass through the legislature, and they do not appear at this point to me to be veto proof. So there may not be an override. We do know that the hearing that was to have started yesterday morning with, I believe it was Officer Daniel Geralds, who had knelt on the neck of a citizen during an arrest, has been postponed again, and that there's a great deal of debate about how widely the public will be available to see that. The plan was to still only have a number of viewing sites instead of broadcasting it like these meetings are broadcast. I believe there is a position for this commission to write a press release addressing all of those issues, the wrongness of what is happening nationally and regionally, the fact that it is reflected locally, and that we are demanding transparency into how it is being addressed, something we should do.
Okay. Commissioner Clapsaddle?
I just, very briefly, Commissioner Dadoni, I think everything you recommended is perfect, because I'm a person who believes that we need to maybe even ask the chief to come back and visit with us again as a commission, because I'm not satisfied things are as transparent as they need to be within our community. So Commissioner Peterson, I would say yes to all of the you brought up. Thank you.
Commissioner Apter?
I feel that we ought to focus on our community. I don't think we are Fortune 500 CEOs making statements on national issues. And I think we ought to stick to dealing with issues in Anne Arundel County, not expanding them to other national issues.
I agree, and I think most of the discussion has related to the Anne Arundel County items. So I think that's what the focus would be in anything that we would do. It is Commissioner Daydoni?
Clearly, Sodi, somebody brought this issue to me as well. Shootings in Minneapolis cause pain in Anne Arundel County. And that's why I say our silence is speaking for us. We do have a local context within which to voice it. But I believe recognition of the ongoing trauma, the pain caused by that trauma, I want to suggest that we address that, not necessarily make it the main point, but that we address it.
As a public relations person, I would suggest that we wait for a verdict in that case.
At this point in time, I guess, are there other commissioners who would like to weigh in? Okay, I'm not hearing any. Yes, Commissioner Daydoni?
I understand that, Commissioner Apter. You are the professional, and I recognize your expertise. The pain is not waiting for the verdict.
Okay.
Pain is not something you can legislate.
Okay, I think we've exhausted discussion in a good way, in a robust way, and I'd like to ask Joelle. I mean, Mary suggested we write a press release. How does that work within the structure of county government for a commission?
That is an excellent question. So as I was, looking at the, I did pull up the powers and duties that are in the code, and they're really, I don't know that you could just make a press release. So what I think you can do, I know recently the Immigrant Affairs Commission was putting together some sort of a statement against the hate bias incidents we've seen recently against Asian Americans. And so they were putting together something like that. I would recommend that you could probably put together some broad statement. So to sort of hit everybody, what as a group, it hears like I hear that you're saying just taking a position against, hate, bias, etc. And we can work through Megan and the county executive's office to get a statement, either put on your website or something like that. And if I could, while we're here, in terms of the letter to the school board and testifying, I also think that you're probably going to have to write a letter to the county executive. The school board is not a it does not fall under him. So I think to support this and to testify as the commission, my recommendation would be to put that in your letter to him, requesting that this commission fully, support the LGBTQ policy.
Okay, we'll do that to get that off to you tomorrow, that you can put on the letterhead and then send it up the flagpole, as they say.
Okay. The other thing is that while I was looking at your the code, it says suggest proposed legislation to the county executive or the county council. So when you're talking about legislation, I think that, if you want to advocate for certain legislation at the local level, I think you could write a letter from the commission to, if you vote on it, to send it to the county executive and to the chair of the county council, in terms of that you're making a recommendation for legislation.
Very, very good. Very good. Very useful.
Commissioner Klopsaddle, I saw your hand.
Yes.
I'm never prepared for unmuting myself. I'm not clear what you're instructing us, Ms. Ridgway. Are you suggesting that we as a commission do not have the authority to issue a press statement? It seems to me that that would be certainly something that we would want to do.
So I'm just looking at the code, which lists the powers and duties. And, in terms of it's receive, mediate, adjudicate complaints, initiate and investigate matters, provide mediation services, adopt rules and procedures, conduct public hearings, but this is for fair housing, provide training and seminars in human relations, conduct educational programs, collect, research, assemble, analyze, and disseminate data and educational materials to assist with the elimination of discrimination, make recommendations to the county executive, the county council, and the county departments and offices on matters involving human relations, including housing discrimination, prejudice, and intergroup relations. Suggest proposed legislation to the county executive or the county council. Cooperate with federal, state, local commission, agencies, organizations, and groups. So those are the powers and duties that are in the code. So just looking at that, I think some of the things that you're talking about are not covered under there as a power and duty. So we could get some direction from the county executive's office if you'd like.
Yeah,
I think
the Office of Law, who wrote, who did the duties when they went into the code.
Yeah, let me jump in. Maybe this could help with this discussion. That's why we issued the George Floyd announcement on the website, because that was the quickest way to get it done. My concern is if we go ahead and we can do this, we can do both. We can put it on the website quickly, and then we can basically go and, as I said, run it up the flagpole, because once it gets to the county executive, it's going to go to the Office of Law. And the Office of Law is going to take time to make their decision, and that's a fact of life. Commissioner Dedoni?
I also want to seek your guidance and clarity on whether or not we have the authority to offer testimony to the Board of Education.
It doesn't look like it to me in the way that the code is written. But again, I'm not the legal authority on this code. I can only tell you by what it says in here. So much of the code for this Human Relations Commission is written around enforcement of fair housing And that's one of the challenges, I think, is with the way the code was written.
Then I do not see a way to get a reading from the Office of Law or the county executive in time to submit testimony on Sunday
So
afternoon.
don't think that you'll have to do that. I think that you could send a letter to the county executive tomorrow to say that you would like to support, as a commission, you would like to support, the LGBTQ plus.
QIA plus.
Yeah. It's just a tongue twister in my mind. I have to think about it as it comes out. So I think that you can do that. And I think that you can get a quick response on that.
Yeah, I concur. And I will, tomorrow morning, I'll get in touch with Megan, and Megan may still be on the call. Megan is listening in. And so my request would be, Megan, early tomorrow morning, then I don't have to make the call. Please, as we're getting the letter drafted, and it'll be in email form, basically state our case and see if you can get a quick response. I think that kind of like addresses a lot of the questions that folks have.
And I think she'll be able to make that happen, right, Megan?
Yes.
Yep.
Great.
Especially when something's time sensitive like this.
Okay. We have Commissioner Apter, did you have a question or comment?
No, I don't.
Okay, thank you.
Call, I think there is one other hand up, Miss Call.
Yes. Soon to be Commissioner Call.
I know.
I'm excited. So I just wanted to comment regarding the press release statement. So correct me if I'm wrong, but my interpretation of the facts have been, because we can provide recommendations to the county executive, can we do that versus make a press release so that way we're in a neutral standing? I just want to say I did participate as an intern in the Prince George's County Police Reform Task Force that the county executive over there established following the death of George Floyd. So maybe that's a recommendation that we can send to the county executive here and just say all of the commissions to participate in making recommendations regarding various topics, whether it's school resource officers, things that are being taught in the school system. Body-worn camera program is currently being implemented in the Anne Arundel County Police Department. So those various topics could also be a part of this instead of doing something so vague as a press release. I think this is deeper than that, and we could cover multiple topics if we did a recommendation such as that.
Thank you. It's good.
Thank you.
Suggestion. Commissioner Saeed.
Yes, I apologize for the early. I am in my phone and I was driving my car. I couldn't really communicate my vote. But just I would like to ask if there is a policy that how the police can deal with the claustrophobic citizen.
I'm not sure. That's a question we can forward to either the Major or Major Goodwin and see if we can get an answer. I'm sure she'll have an answer for that, but I'll get an answer to your question. I will send an email tomorrow.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so on this item, what the sense of what I have is that we will move ahead with two tracks, and correct me if I'm wrong, commissioners. One would be to develop a statement, and I'd like to have somebody to help volunteer to help me with this to either say, you know, we're reiterating our support of the issues that we addressed after the murder of George Floyd because of the continuing unwarranted use of excessive force in our nation, and we are really disturbed by the killing of another young African-American father in Minneapolis, Dante Wright. And we feel that these initiatives need to be taken seriously, considered, and as many as can be implemented so that we don't have these kinds of things happen in Anne Arundel County. So we could do something like that. But I'll need somebody to help me with the word smithing. So that's one action we would take. And the other one that we have discussed is Megan will talk to the county executive. I'll send an email to Joel and Megan and requesting that we be able to provide testimony at the April 21st April 21st school board meeting in support of our vote to support the policy recommendations of the WISE LGBTQ coalition, LGBTQ plus Anne Arundel County Coalition recommendations for policy changes in Anne Arundel County. So those are two things. Did I get it right? Okay, I think I did. I don't hear any additional comments suggesting other activity. So those two actions will be taken tomorrow, early tomorrow. And now we're moving to item 8 on our agenda, good and welfare. Any announcements anybody has, commissioners have? Okay, hearing none. I'd like to say that our next monthly virtual meeting will be on Thursday, May 20th, 2021 at 6 p.m. And with that, I believe, I'd like to call the or ask for a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn this meeting.
Thank you. It's been moved by Commissioner Daydoni and seconded by Commissioner Said. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay. I want to thank everybody, including those who were listening in for participation. Very lively and good debate and ongoing discussion of business by the Human Relations Commission. And with that, I'll say good night and we'll see you May 20th.
All right.
Night.